Hi everyone, so I am going to be talking about the results I found when giving out the cursive handwriting survey to 5 different teachers. So I did all 5 our teachers, but I did some from Kirkmere and then some from Niles Primary School. So for question number 1, teaching cursive writing is important. The first grade special education teacher at Niles said that she disagrees because she asked me if she should take it in the sense that she's a first grade teacher, so teaching cursive writing is not important to her for a first grader. Mrs. Khalil, a 6th year, so a younger 3rd grade teacher, agrees. Mrs. Collins, another first grade sped teacher, also agrees, and another 3rd grade teacher at Kirkmere agreed, and Mr. Ellis, a 3rd grade teacher who's older, strongly agreed that teaching cursive writing is important. Question number 2, I use cursive writing daily. So Mrs. Collins, the 1st grade sped teacher, disagreed with this, and then all of my other participants said 4 that they agree. So Mrs. Khalil, so 3 3rd grade teachers and another 1st grade sped teacher agreed that they use cursive daily. Number 3, students benefit from learning cursive writing. Mrs. Enyart, the 1st grade sped teacher, disagreed because, again, she was taking it as if, so she was saying a 1st grade student does not benefit from learning cursive writing. And both young 3rd grade teachers agreed. Mr. Ellis strongly agreed, and Mrs. Collins, the 1st grade sped teacher, agreed. Number 4, cursive is just as important as print. Mrs. Enyart, the 1st grade sped teacher, disagreed because she did not believe that a 1st grader learning cursive writing is more important than print. Same thing as the last one. Mrs. Collins, Mrs. Khalil, and the other young 3rd grade teacher agreed, and Mr. Ellis, a 3rd grade teacher, strongly agreed. Number 5, cursive should be practiced in every grade. Mrs. Enyart, the 1st grade sped teacher, Mrs. Collins, the other 1st grade sped teacher, and the young 3rd grade teacher from Kirkmere disagreed. Cursive should not be practiced in every grade. Mrs. Khalil, the 6th year 3rd grade teacher, is neutral, and Mr. Ellis agrees that cursive should be practiced in every grade. I am comfortable with teaching cursive. Number 6. Mrs. Enyart, Mrs. Collins, the young 3rd grade teacher, and Mrs. Khalil all agreed, and Mr. Ellis strongly agreed. So all of my teachers agreed that they're comfortable teaching cursive writing. Number 7, cursive handwriting should be taught in 3rd grade. These were the same results as number 6. So everyone agreed, and Mr. Ellis strongly agreed. Number 8, teaching cursive takes away from more important content standards. Mr. Ellis strongly disagreed that it does not take away from other content standards. Mrs. Khalil, the 6th year 3rd grade teacher, disagreed. Mrs. Collins, 1st grade sped teacher, disagreed. And Mrs. Enyart, the 1st grade sped teacher, and the other young 3rd grade teacher at Kirkmere were neutral. So they did not, no one agreed that it takes away from more important content standards. Number 9, teaching cursive writing should be a priority. Mrs. Enyart, the 1st grade sped teacher at Niles, disagreed because, again, she was taking it as a 1st grade teacher. Both young 3rd grade teachers and the 1st grade sped teacher, Mrs. Collins, are neutral, and Mr. Ellis agrees that cursive writing should be a priority. Number 10, has COVID made it too difficult to focus on cursive writing? Both 1st grade sped teachers, Mrs. Collins and Mrs. Enyart, are neutral, probably because they do not teach cursive for the 1st graders. And the rest, the 2 young 3rd grade teachers and Mr. Ellis, another 3rd grade teacher, agreed that it's made it a little difficult to focus on cursive writing. The explanation with those 3, and I'm in Mrs. Khalil's class, so they do cursive handwriting every day, but I think that the kids are probably farther behind than they normally would be, especially with third grade, because they were in kindergarten when COVID was going on. So I think they would be more ahead if it weren't have been for COVID. So I believe those are all my results. So I thought it was interesting that Mr. Ellis, the oldest teacher that I surveyed, was definitely the most agreeing that cursive writing is important and it should be a priority and it should still be taught. I think that was what a lot of us expected giving the survey. So